Did you know, I know you know, but do they know that buyers could be responsible for 100% of the commission to be paid to a buyer's agent? Did you know that? If you didn't, you should. Stay tuned. Up next, we're going to talk about what's going on in the real estate business that could affect you as a buyer and ultimately you as a seller. Come and join us. Leisa Erickson, Bryan Daane, Engel and Völkers, St. Pete Beach.
So there's a lot to unpack here. A lot. There's some recent changes in our industry that's affecting both buyers and sellers, right? So I think let's get into it a little bit, and I would start with.
Are you gonna punch me?
No.
You're gonna get into it.
Huh?
You're gonna get into it.
No, I mean unpacking it, right?
Anyway, yeah,
Okay.
I know what you mean. So yeah, I mean it's a hot topic. It's
It
a
is.
controversial topic.
Yeah.
Amongst us in the industry.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what do you think about it? What's going on?
I think. Well, first off, I've been in the industry since 2008. Right.
You've seen a lot of changes.
And I've seen a lot of changes, but nothing like this. I think the reaction within the industry as a whole is unlike anything I've seen in the past. I think the repercussions are going to have a real ripple effect, not just that. And let me explain a little bit about what I'm talking about first. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because the general public probably is not very aware of what is actually happening. They may have heard some things, but they don't know what it really means.
Right.
So yeah, explain what it is. What is it that's going to be happening potentially?
Right. So we right now are looking at that the sellers no longer need to be responsible for the commission, and I guess they didn't in the past, but it's. There's no guarantee to the buyer's agent anymore for any commission, right?
Right.
And which go ahead.
And just to clarify, so when you're saying there's no guarantee of payment of commission,
Right.
Sort of a new phenomenon for those of you who didn't know. Historically, in the MLS, there would be an offer of compensation for a buyer's agent to bring a buyer to the table. So that is the historic change that we're talking about. So keep going.
Right.
I'm just trying to add the context for this.
Right. So the change is that no longer is. The industry is changing. That's probably not going to be as prevalent as it was before. Correct.
Correct. So if you ask our attorneys, who are very well connected to broader parts of the world where this is emanating from, in Kansas City, they have told us that prepare that you are no longer able. Not even if the seller wanted to, not even able. They're telling us prepare that you're not able to take that commission. That you may in part have to do maybe multiple different things. One of which could be negotiate with the seller directly, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard, by the way. We don't do that. I don't know how I would go about doing that. That's a whole mechanical kind of issue. So that's question number one that could happen.
Right.
Second issue would be that we basically would have to get it from the buyer, right?
Right.
That's another option.
Yeah.
So it becomes a closing cost to them, which is very exorbitant. It could range anywhere between 0 to whatever percent. It could range it depends on what the agent's going to take as their commission payment for the work. So that's historic change.
Right. And I think, to me, I don't understand this change as much as being in the industry and knowing what we do, right? There's a value to what we've been doing with the buyers and bringing them to the sellers. Obviously, we're providing that service. More qualified buyers by the seller being able to cover the commissions, right? So that change, I think in the long run is, I mean, people are going to realize that, you know, there's going to be a smaller buyer pool for their homes, and probably not as much activity, because now, you know, the buyers are, you know, going to be more responsible for those commission charges, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, I mean, you bring up a good point, because what the probably the general public that isn't in the business doesn't really realize is that, so if you go and you take a listing and you are the listing agent and your sign goes in the yard, you basically share your commission. In most of our history that we've been working in the business, we would share our commission with the agent who brought the buyer.
right.
That could be you that brought the buyer, or it could be anybody that
Right.
could really bring the buyer, right? And so you
Right.
shared in that commission base. Moving forward, if you think about the impact to a buyer, so let's just say that you have a commission agreement now for the listing, and I bring the buyer. Well, think about this if you're a seller, because I'm going to talk to you directly as a seller right now. If you have an agreement with Brian, and the agent that brings the buyer is now responsible for either collecting their own commission, or the buyer is going to have to pay it. It's one way or the other where it's going to come from.
Right.
You're right. The pool is going to be much shallower, because that's not how historically we have worked. We share an inventory so that everybody has a fair shot at gaining a possibility to buy that property.
Right.
So if you're a seller and you now eliminate that as a possibility, yes, your traffic is going to be heavily impacted on a downward spiral.
Right. And less qualified buyers, for sure. I
Yes.
mean, because I know working in the industry, I mean, it's just human nature. They kind of run that line, you know. They kind of, unfortunately, I think a lot of them go to really what they can afford, right?
Sure.
I mean, to the max that they're qualified for. And when you start looking at they're going to have to cover that commission as well, and you add that to their expenses, they're no longer going to be able to buy in those same price ranges, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe even qualify at all.
Yeah, I mean, we're historically high pricing, right, in the markets. I don't care what market you're in. Historically high pricing, high interest rates, for not great product, right? So the escalation of basically pricing is priced a lot of people out of a home that they would actually really love to buy, and now they're at a price point where they're like, that's not so attractive, and now you add on closing costs
Right.
to that. For the commission base, that makes things incredibly unaffordable, because there are some people who do not have this kind of money laying around to add to that purchase price, right? Some
Right.
people can barely scrape up enough for a down payment, 3.5% or 5%. If you're just a first-time home buyer, that is really going to impact them. I would think you would see a big change in the first-time home buyer market. I mean, that's what my sense. I mean, what
Right.
do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, especially in the first-time home buyers, right? But I really think it's going to have an effect, beyond that as well. I think this change is, if it changes the way we do business, I think there's, I've seen other things in our industry over the years, not as critical as this, but have ripple effects that, I think there's going to be some things that come down the road that we're not anticipating this change affecting. And then it's
Such
gonna,
as what? What comes to your mind
I mean,
first?
obviously I don't have a crystal ball and can't
No.
anticipate, but, I think if we're looking at, if you're starting to look at buyers being responsible for the commission now, right? I think one of those ripple effects is it could be lessening of a home value in the long run. I mean, our market's softened a little bit from where it was, 2-3 years ago. I think with this new change, especially right now, could have an effect where perhaps in some markets, now we're in a little bit of a sheltered market because we have, a very strong market, but I think especially in markets where it's not as strong, that you may see some sellers thinking they're this is great. I'm saving some money on not having to cover, both sides of those commissions, but you're going to lose that value in your home. I think that's one thing that I anticipate You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I also think that you're going to see possibly commission rates go up rather than down from this. I think when you start seeing that there's going to be more value to the realtor, definitely. I think the importance of having a realtor, and I think need to get into that, but I anticipate that, there's probably going to be some people out there that are going to say, no, I'm not covering that buyer's commission, right? And the buyers may tend to either go to the listing agent directly or try to do these deals on their own, right?
Yeah.
And I think they're going to find out that a lot of properties aren't going to close as a result of that. Mm-hmm. I think that you're going to see a lot more problems arise in our industry just going through the deals. I think you're going to see the people that survive this, full-time realtors that are truly committed and providing a service, right? A product that, as a result of this, are reacting and strengthening their services rather than pulling back, right? I think they're not going to be willing to charge less for that. I think we're going to, in the long run, need to charge more because we're going to have higher costs.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I would say, if I think through, like, if now you're the listing agent and you now have to deal with the buyer as well, which, by the way, I don't really like. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I like there to be a separation of church and state. Like, if I had a choice, I really do prefer that another agent brings the other side of the deal, because
right.
I think it creates fairness, and I think it creates sort of a wall that is in the transaction so that both parties feel like they have a representative.
Right.
So, but nonetheless, you're now the listing agent. You're now going to have to deal with the buyer's side of the deal additionally.
Right.
What people don't realize, I think, is that it's not like I can just take a lower commission because I'm now representing both sides. Representing both sides is actually one of the most difficult jobs there is.
Right.
The fiduciary responsibilities and keeping everything sort of above board and managing all the expectations to make sure no party feels like there was sort of like coercion or anything.
Unfairness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough job. And I think, to your point, what could happen, and I think you could be onto something, is that commissions could rise because you're having to deal with both.
Right.
And that's not easy.
Yeah.
That's definitely not easy. You might have to hire attorneys to make sure that there's cooperation and, sort of the separation of both parties.
Right.
I can see where you're heading with that for sure.
Yeah. And why wouldn't you? I mean, I don't understand why you wouldn't, as a buyer or seller, want the two sides. I mean, like you said, to your point, I really, it's sort of like, I mean, the way I look at it is, home buying is going to be one of your biggest expenses, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's one of your biggest investments in your life.
Yeah. Most important investment, at times,
Exactly.
For most people, it really is.
Right.
Aside from their 401k and their retirement savings, this is their number one most valued asset.
Right.
Huge decision.
Right. Well, and again, when you separate the buyer and seller agents, right? As a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, I can solely look out for their best interests, like you were saying. To me, I think that negotiating power is a huge value because, a savvy, smart, educated agent, is going to be able to provide the best services for their clients by looking out for their best interests, right? If you take that away, right? If a agent has to be more neutral in these, right? Then it's just pretty much whatever it's pretty much whatever you have in your offer on paper, right? And there's a lot more to an offer than just the price. It's all the terms. It's how you negotiate it. It's the agent that you're working with. It's all kinds of things. I mean, I don't think people realize as agents that we look at, if I'm advising a seller, right? Of course, we're going to look at price, right? But we're going to look at those terms as well. And we're going to look at, a whole lot of things. As an agent, I want to know that the other agent is working closely with the bank. I mean, there's a lot more points and people involved, so I want to talk to the banker, or I want to hear from that other agent. I want to know the likelihood of how that agent works and their success in closing their deals. I mean, the best offer in the world is no good if it never closes, right?
Correct. And, and vetting that out as a professional in the business, there's definitely an art and a science to that, right? With rounds of experience and figuring out what deal is going to get to the table, or what agent's going to not create enough havoc in the deal that you can, have a good experience. I mean, I totally agree with that. The thing that I think most people probably haven't yet realized, and the business hasn't even realized it yet, to be honest, is if you think about your use of Zillow, right? Buyers are going to use Zillow. Sellers are going to use Zillow for Zestimates. So, question becomes, I'm a user of Zillow. If you're thinking about buying a property, right? Put myself in their shoes. And now Zillow is like the holy grail of property, right? Because it's an open forum, all the listings are there. But guess what? When you take away buyer's agent compensation, the whole business model for Zillow, for example, or Realtor.com, which are the two most widely used platforms.
Right.
What will happen then? How will you then, as a user of Zillow, be able to dial up and go, hey, I'd like to see property 123 Main Street, and how do you get a buyer's agent to react to that when there's no compensation on offer?
Right.
So you want to talk about the upending of our business, but the other tangential businesses that surround our business. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that's going to affect, like I said, this ripple effect. And again, I mean, I think to that point, if you start softening the market in some of the tools that buyers are going to use historically to find homes, and it's a way to drive buyers to sellers. If you soften that, again, that's that ripple effect that I don't think sellers are going to be.
It's not even softening it. Let's be real. It's going to be like, let me just take this out of the equation. This is all going to be gone. This is all off the table now.
Right.
Go ahead, Zillow users. Go ahead and try to find your houses and get somebody to react to you, because I can tell you from a listing agent's perspective.
Right.
If that happens, you're going to have call centers to handle all these calls.
Yeah.
Most agents can't handle that kind of volume of call.
Right.
It's a whole paradigm shift. I mean, there's so many effects to that.
Yeah.
That you as a buyer potentially don't understand, that we're managing through.
Yeah.
That could directly impact exactly the way you look at Zillow right now, or any of these portals.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit. So I think kind of covered, what's happening, and, the potential and kind of what we're seeing as to how this is starting to affect our market, right?
Yep.
Our industry. Let's talk about, what a buyer can do with a buyer's agent, right, to kind of compensate for that. Because I think the scary thing for buyers, right, would be that they're out there and they're like, oh no, now I have this added expense that I have to figure in the equation. I don't know if I should go back and look at homes again. Maybe I don't qualify anymore, especially people that first-time buyers that maybe were on the fence, or you know what I mean,
Sure.
and just getting qualified, or had to repair credit, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
It could potentially take them out of the market, right?
Yeah.
So the good news is, as agents, I wouldn't say all agents. I think it's the support behind them. But there's ways that we can work deals where they can get compensated, or that coverage can more likely be handled.
Well, be more specific, because the person listening may not know how that gets handled.
Right.
What do you see happening? So like set these guys' mind at ease, because I'm sure that they're concerned. So
Right.
what can you do, Sir Master Buyer's Agent, to help these guys?
Yeah,
I think they're concerned about this. I think it's valid.
Yeah, and I think first off, there's still going to be a lot of sellers offering the commission.
I hope so. But
Yeah.
again, back to what our attorney has already stated, be prepared that you cannot take a commission from the listing agent.
Right.
Then where do
But
we
we
get
can
that
write
from?
we can write it in the offers, right?
I mean, there's a whole host of things that could go on. But anyway, I just want to. I'm
Yeah.
just putting these little caveats in there, because what we assume is going to happen and what actually might happen is,
Yeah,
I
two
don't know.
different things. We're kind of in a gray area holding pattern, right?
Very gray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
I-
I hope that's the case.
Yeah.
And assuming that we could take that money.
yeah, yeah,
Or figure out a way to get it so that the buyer wouldn't have to
right,
pay that. Yeah.
right. I think there's a number of ways, though. I think
Okay.
one way is through the written contract initially, right?
Written contract of
Of the purchase
agreement.
purchase agreement, right? Some way of negotiating that through that contract. I think the other thing is there's a real estate transaction it has a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of negotiating. There's a lot of reevaluating the price and conditions and all that, right?
Sure.
I can see that there probably is going to be an effect for negotiations, particularly in home inspections and stuff, where buyers probably aren't going to be as likely to let as much go unchecked, or to they'll probably want a lot more cured on the property, right? As a result of now they're paying a premium
Yes.
to
They
buy
definitely-
that property. They expect it to be
It
better.
literally is like a buyer's premium on an auction.
Right.
That's kind of where we're at. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So, one way we can compensate for that with the buyer is to, have different conversations with those kind of negotiations, right? That we're going to, I personally can see that, we're going to be having to take more of a stand on our, and the buyer will need to, right?
And guess what? Think about this. If the listing agent is doing all that as a seller, how do you think that's going to be managed? And if you're the buyer, who's going to get the short end of the stick? I don't know.
Right.
You don't know, because you're playing both sides constantly.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you know as a buyer you got the best deal and you got the best negotiating power? You don't.
Right.
Seller, how do you same thing? How are you making sure that the agent's not conceding and trying to get the commission just to get the deal done, to get it over with?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that's a huge one right there, right? I also think, in working these transactions, there's a lot more people involved, right? I mean, as an agent, I'm going to work with title companies. I'm going to work with the banks, right? There's ways that we can try to, if we have lenders that, that we, have good communication with and, are willing to help us out to get these buyers qualified or get this deal done, they may end up having to work with the agent. And there's some things that we should be able to do.
Are you saying that you foresee the lenders needing to kick in money?
I think that the lenders either are going to have to provide services or products that are going to have to be somewhat negotiable to be able to compensate somewhat for this, or I think that they're probably in the end going to have to kick in. Yeah, if they're going to want these properties to close, right? And we have a lot of work put out. I mean, as agents, I think this is the one thing in our industry that nobody realizes. We can put in a lot of work and get paid nothing in the end for it.
Same
right?
thing with the lenders, yeah.
Yeah. So exactly.
What business is like that, by the way? I mean, I really can't think of any other business except for like stockbrokers. If you decide not to basically buy the stock, they recommend you use that broker.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the general public, there's a huge population out there that are W-2 employees that have a nice salary or paid hourly, and Yeah, they have that guarantee. We in this business don't have that, right? A lot of
Right.
people probably don't understand that. So we choose to be in a business where we put people in cars with us. We take them along to show them property, to get them into a dream place, all on the aspirational goal of being paid and compensated for the time that we're going to spend and all the expenses that we're going to incur.
Right.
Yeah, I bet you that people don't really think about that as to what we do.
Yeah. So and again, the lender's kind of in the same boat, right? They can put in a lot of work. So I think that's gonna have to change a little bit. There's going to have to be some work around this a little bit, or there's just not going to be as many closings. I think there's not going to be as many buyers that are going to qualify. So again, this ripple effect is going to reach out. I think there's a lot of things that we don't know yet, but I think in the long run, we're going to really see, how dramatically this could affect our industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
so let me ask you a question.
yes.
So based on this changing situation that we have and how this was litigated, I mean, obviously we were not sitting in a courtroom. We were not privy to all the testimony. We were privy to some of it. Are you surprised by this verdict?
I am surprised. I am very surprised. I think that, I understand how this was questioned. That I get, okay? But what I don't understand is how I feel it's very short-sighted in only considering one aspect of this, right? I don't think that they looked at the bigger picture. I don't think there was enough consideration as to what all goes on as a result of that way that was structured. Right?
Yeah, right.
I think I am very surprised that not only the people that I guess I'm very surprised that they didn't come out more clearly, and that the verdict was or that things are the way they are right now, right? Mm-hmm. I just either people don't understand or they just don't understand. I think they don't understand how complicated real estate really is.
No. I mean, in a court of law, right? They were arguing for several years about pricing and listing agents being paid and buyers agents to come, et cetera. It was somewhat of a clear-cut like case, like in terms of like it didn't look at all these other things that are involved with our profession of what we do on a daily basis, right?
Right.
It looked at this situation, in my opinion, very myopically. And so the verdict, yeah, I would agree with you. It's very shocking that this happened. And just in transparency, I mean, I'll say it. You can say your opinion. Mm-hmm. I think it's crazy. For anybody who's ever been in real estate for 10 seconds and actually worked in a brokerage or as a member of a board, there's no collusion of pricing. That's the craziest part, is that
right.
I've been in brokerages where there's 200, 300 agents. I've been in brokerages where there's 50 and 20 agents. We don't talk about commissions.
Right.
We don't talk. It's not like I can go, you're in another brokerage. Hey, Brian.
Right.
Hey.
Right.
You better keep that commission intact. And it's kind of the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, how low do I need to go to get this business? I mean, it's the reversal at times.
Exactly.
It's very competitive what we do, and so to think that somehow or another there's collusion.
Yeah.
It's absurd to us.
And I think a lot of that has to do with, I mean, honestly, and this may be the silver lining to all this, is that I think that these sellers were looking at like, well, geez, look how much they're making. Look at the commission that they're charging, and why am I covering that other side for that amount, right? This is the thing. I know, and I know especially being a broker, right? But I know that, there's a lot of people involved in a transaction. And when you look at what we're making is very not what people are thinking. You know, there's, I mean, there are a lot of expenses.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right? I mean, truly,
Yeah.
that in the end, what people think we make is nowhere near, not even close.
No.
Right? And so I think, again, you know, that's a misconception, and I think had to drive this a lot. You know, I think the silver lining to this is, you know, now we're going to have a separation more of buyers and sellers, right? And I think, like I said, the commissions will go up because there's going to be a lot of people that I don't think are going to survive this in the long run.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think as a brokerage, you have to, you know, first off, the agents have to have some kind of support system behind them, right? This changes a lot.
Yeah.
So if we have brokers that are more of a discount broker, okay, or charging lesser commissions, right? They don't have that money to support their agents.
No.
Yeah, right. They can't provide the same level of service and support.
No.
Right. So you're gonna, you know, and this is a very, you know, technical thing in our industry that this changes. That I think that, you know, as agents, the ones that are going to survive are the ones that are going to have the support, the ones that are going to have the resources to be able to handle this change. I mean, there's going to be more people involved rather than less because, right? I mean,
Yeah, because to further incite this, if you think about this from a brokerage perspective, so we carry the weight, right, of the entire brokerage. So any issue that's dealt with, whether that's during the transaction, post the transaction, litigation, anything like that, right? It's all handled by the brokerage. So what the public doesn't understand is that the money that you take for a commission, you know, if simplest way I can put it is if we divide the money that we're receiving and we divide it into thirds, a third's going to the brokerage to basically support you.
Right.
In the case of litigation and all the things you're going to need to handle for you and for the transaction.
Right.
Errors and omissions insurance, training, support,
Yeah.
platforms, listing platforms, buyer platforms,
Yeah.
staff to basically make sure you have the support that you need. There's a lot that goes on into that. That is not just like, let me collect, you know, a paycheck and run on. No.
Right.
So a third goes into the brokerage side.
Yeah.
Third goes probably into your expense side.
Yeah.
Taxes, car
Yeah.
insurance, all the expenses to run,
Insurance,
licensing,
Yeah.
you know, all the gas that you have to pay around in that big truck you drive around. You know, so, I mean, there's a lot of things going on, right? And then you maybe keep the last third of it.
Right.
And that's what people absolutely do not recognize. They just think it's a cash cow, but you have to pay taxes. You're not a W-2. You have to pay your
Right.
own taxes.
Right.
And all your expenses. You don't have a company credit card that's cha-chinging out anything.
Right.
You know, it's all on you.
Right, exactly. And the other thing that I don't think that, I really think that we're probably going to see our insurance be dramatically affected by this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Without a doubt.
I mean, that,
Because you're gonna have a lot of claims. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
The litigation. I'll tell you who's gonna get rich. Mark my words. Who is it?
the insurance companies,
Second one.
the attorneys.
Yes. Hello. The attorneys are going to get rich.
Sure.
This is the most absurd part about it is, you know, the attorneys are never going to discount their hourly rate, by the way. I don't know if y'all knew that.
Yeah.
Some of them are very deserving of their hourly rate. I'm not saying attorneys are not amazing. I've had some fantastic attorneys, and I have many around me that are amazing. There are attorneys, though, that are money grabbers, okay?
Yeah.
And I got some sitting outside right here on the door. Now, they're taking 30% of these cases, 30 to 40% win of that award rate is going to these attorneys.
Yeah,
That's
that's
who's going to
crazy.
get
That's a
rich.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's nuts.
Yeah, you know the other thing too is just immediately, I think all these brokerages, obviously had to consult attorneys to understand the legal ramifications of this. So I mean, just immediately your expenses go up. I mean, I don't know.
Do you think our errors and omissions insurance is going to go down?
No,
No,
yeah.
it is not. And with the things that are going to go on, it's like FEMA. FEMA got into a lot of trouble because they were paying out cases for floods that happened in areas that there wasn't even a FEMA policy because there's no floodplain.
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to become crazier, and so that will elevate all the issues that we have relative to all the cash it's going to take to basically make these transactions happen. Because guess what? People are still going to buy and sell.
Right.
So the fees are probably going to have to come up to account for all of this because someone, has to pay. I mean, I don't have a money tree sitting outside over here that I can go pick some cash off of.
Right.
It's all going to flow downhill.
Yeah.
And we can thank the litigator on that. I mean, for me, that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think when you look at this, I mean, again, I think this is really short-sighted from their point of view, as to not looking at, because this affects every single person in our lifetime. I mean, I think most people buy or sell a home, right? So it affects every single person. It affects my kids' kids down the road. I mean, everybody's going to be affected by this if it continues. So, when you change an industry dramatically like that, nobody can. I mean, as much as they think that they're doing good, maybe they're in the end probably going to do a lot more harm than good, and really it's the general public that's going to pay the price. I mean, the general home buyer and seller both together are going to pay the price, as much as people think that the sellers are winning in this. They're not. So another thing I wanted to kind of touch on base on here real quick is the value and why it is important to have a real estate agent work your deals, right? One thing I had a broker tell me this when I started, and I was like, it really made an impact on my mentality as to the value that we have, right? Everybody knows that, there's attorneys and, what they're going to charge and, and all that, and that's great. But, really, in essence, what we're doing is we're practicing limited law. And when I say limited, we don't have the ability to write our own contracts. No. An attorney has to do that. However, we work with contracts, and we're working in a transaction. So
and
we're
binding contracts,
right.
Yeah.
So we're practicing limited law in essence. So I think, it would be like, why would you, it'd be like having some kind of situation where you would have an attorney on one side, right? And why would you go and confront that without an attorney on your side? I mean, why would you do that? Who would? Especially in the biggest purchase, or one of the bigger investments in your life, right?
So maybe, as a hypothesis,
right?
Maybe every state will become an attorney state.
Well, do you think attorneys are going to run around and show properties and do what we do? And attorneys are not going to work as cheap as we do. You know that. No. I know that too. I actually have a relative who's a real estate attorney, and we've had this conversation many, many times. And
they can just get door openers. They can get door openers that'll just, because people think that's what we do is open doors. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. No. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But I'm actually kind of kidding around. But I get your point. We are in essence working in the confines of what we can do legally with contracts that we have. Yeah. And
I mean, so I think let's look at it from this point of view. Mm-hmm. Okay. So a lot of people, you said door openers, and that just made me think immediately like, okay, well then you don't understand that there's a lot more to a transaction. I mean, we work with title, we watch out for their best interests there, we work with...
But people don't know what that means, Brian. So when you say I work with title,
title.
Explain why that's important, because they don't understand what title insurance is or why that would be important or what kind of liens would convey, not convey.
Right.
I mean, what should they know? Because they don't know.
Right. So well, I'm going to let you explain. I mean, I can explain it, but why don't you explain it? You have a very good grasp on that too.
Yeah. Okay. So, title companies, you think, oh God, it's another type of insurance that I don't need, right?
Right.
It's like buying life insurance, almost. You kind of feel like. But here's the thing with title insurance. Title insurance really is for the benefit mostly of the seller. People think it's really for the benefit of the buyer, but it actually really benefits the seller, because as a buyer, you are guaranteeing that you are receiving this property free and clear of encumbrances, right, and liens, right? That's one issue. But the actual insurance insures claims that come after the fact if there's anything that was missed. So it's actually a protection for the seller. I hate to bust people's bubble, but that is really the part of it that is what's happening. The most important part, though, that I find for title insurance is part of the lien searches and all the municipal permit searches and things that are coming back that would tell you as the buyer, hey, there's activity that's been happening on this house that you probably should be aware of and might want to mitigate before you close on this, because this is going to immediately become your problem. Because there's a lot of things that deal with title work to create a title policy that actually hugely impact you as a buyer.
Right.
Those are the things that he's talking about that we're watching for a buyer client. So hopefully that explains a little bit. But keep going.
It does, and again, I don't think, in a transaction, I mean, I think even a lot of agents aren't aware that, how much negotiation actually goes on. And it's not just negotiation, but it's also fact-checking and research and following up and working with municipalities and working with the insurance and all that. I mean, just in negotiating, that may be another point that you perhaps are renegotiating some terms on that deal. Yes. Right? So it's, a lot of people look at it like an inspection period where you have a period where you can inspect the home, right? Mm-hmm. And make sure what you're seeing that you're buying is what you're buying, right? Yeah. You want to know what's wrong with it. That's the time, right? And then there's also the appraisal. Right, and that may be another point of negotiation, but then also
because what some people don't realize is there's short appraisals.
Right.
Short appraisals meaning the property didn't come into value.
Right.
At the sales price that you have it in contract for.
Right.
So what do you do then?
Yeah.
You've got to negotiate these things, and that's part of what you're talking about.
And just on that point alone, I think a lot of people think that's just negotiating with the seller. Right, that you're just renegotiating a price or whatever, right? And it's not. It may be negotiating with the bank. It may be negotiating with the appraiser.
Yes.
There's a lot. I mean, this is what I'm saying. There's so many aspects of a deal in different directions that the value in the agent is having the resources and the knowledge and continuing education. I mean, like Lisa's brokerage is awesome in that you really provide continuing education. I mean, there's literally every day where we can show up and there's some education to further our knowledge of what's going on, right?
Super important.
Literally every day.
Important.
Unlike like I've been in this industry for over 15 years now, and it's unlike any other brokerage I've been part of. And I've been in good brokerages, but this is, it's awesome. That's why I'm here.
Thank you so much.
Right. And so, that in itself, like I said, it just, the amount of work that goes into these transactions and being savvy and aware and knowing how to handle it, and legally, I heard at one point that, now don't quote me on this, but maybe that we touch on like 169 points of law in a transaction.
177.
177.
Plus like 111 more.
Right.
Yeah.
So for agents, the weekend warrior or the part-timers, and I say that, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is that silver lining that I'm talking about before. I think this is going to add value. This is going to, I mean, it's really going to separate the people who really are going to be good at this.
Great at this.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of great agents, right? You
Yeah.
being one of those. And, you know, there's a bunch of people who I would say, I don't want to categorize them as part-time, but they might be in the discount broker side where they don't have the resourcing, they don't have the knowledge transfer that needs to go on.
Right.
They just may not be as tooled up and
Right.
sophisticated just because of their experience or their background.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it does exist, and I think it will separate the wheat from chaff. Like, it will further polarize the business.
Right.
I think it's actually a good thing because I prefer to have the most professional that, you know, we could in our business.
Right.
So I don't think it's a bad thing, but John Q. Public doesn't probably understand that. And let me give you maybe an analogy for the people who are listening. You want to go get a surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't even want to. You have to. And it's kind of an important thing, kind of like your house. You know, it's the biggest investment you're going to make. And, you know, this could go really wrong, that surgery, which,
Right.
by the way, real estate transactions can go really wrong,
Yeah.
really wrong. And you don't hear about it a lot because we're not allowed to talk about it because we're in a cone of silence, okay? We have to respect, you know, people and confidences and things like that. So you don't hear about the crazy disasters that we actually see and can experience. Anyway, you're going to go and you're going to get this surgery. And are you going to choose the cheapest surgeon that you can find for your very important, maybe life-saving surgery? Or
Right. No. Right. Of course not.
no.
Right.
Okay, it's the same analogy,
Yeah.
right? Are you going to pick the Sally Sue's brother, sister's mother to help you in your transaction because you know them and you feel like you need to give them a deal? Or do you need somebody savvy, sophisticated, uber powerful professional, somebody like Brian, to get the job done? And it's actually the same price.
Right. Yeah.
know,
It
I mean-
doesn't. There's no right. You're going to pay the same thing. I mean,
Yeah, but how do you vet them out, right? So
Right.
the public doesn't know how to even do that. So what's the question or questions that if you're going to hire an agent to represent you and your interests in your most dire moment of need to finish this transaction and finish it well, what should buyers ask their agents to make sure that they know what they're doing?
I mean, personally, I am very big on, communication and the game plan, right? I want to know that I, am using somebody, I want them knowing that they're using somebody who has the resources, that also has the game plan and experience that they can navigate a transaction successfully.
Give them the questions. The question would look like, and you can look right in the camera and say,
Okay.
ask these questions because they need to know. They do not know. God bless them. They don't know how to vet the people. I mean, you can look at health grade scores, right, through maybe looking for a surgeon, but they need the questions.
Right.
What questions should they ask?
Well, if it was me, and I guess I would be talking to my kids, and I wasn't an agent, right? I would tell them to ask, maybe for some success. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody that hasn't had a lot of transactions isn't successful, right? But again, I would ask them, I mean, this is my personal opinion. I think that somebody that has cut their teeth on some transactions is
Give us a number because they don't know. They don't know if it should be 10, 20, 50.
Okay, I would say, if you have an agent that has done at least 5-6 deals in the last year, I mean, that to me is showing that they're out there working, that they understand, that they're motivated to succeed in their industry, right? If you have an agent who gets into the industry and has done 1 or 2 or 3 deals, to me, boy, I don't know. I'm not going to trust that. It's not the number of deals, but I know as an experienced agent, the motivation to be successful in this business, if you are, I don't care who you are, if you work diligently and are committed to real estate, you are going to do at least 4, 5, 6 deals, right? Yeah. There's almost no way you can't, right?
Okay, so let me just clarify. Mm-hmm. So they need to at least have a success, in the past year of where they've completed about 5 transactions.
At least 5, and that they're working full time, right?
They're working full time, that they don't have a separate job where they're showing up to.
Right, exactly. Okay. I would also want to know that, I would also want to know that they have the support staff. So I would ask. If you're talking to an agent, what kind of support do you have behind you? Not just as an agent, but as as a brokerage. And let me explain that a little bit. Our brokerage, is big on education. Our brokerage has a lot of communication internally, right? There is a lot of different avenues for us to communicate. We have apps, we have meetings, we have these educational things every single day. We have a lot going on, right? Just as an agent, I know you need to be around an office, you need to be around other agents, you need to for that experience, for that knowledge, for that to be able to be better at doing deals, right?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Go ahead.
They could ask, tell me the last 3 educational classes that you took.
Sure.
And what were they about? And
right.
Tell me what you've done in the last 6 months on education.
Right.
Because everything changes in our business, right?
Right.
It's constantly evolving.
Right.
So I think would that be an okay question to ask?
An okay question. I would ask, what kind of support is your company have for you?
Okay. Do you have transaction management? Is that a good question for them
transaction management? Are you able to get in touch with your broker if you need to?
Yeah, sure.
Because I can tell you honestly, there is not a lot of brokers out there, especially the discount brokers, that you can actually get a hold of the broker, right? It's a shame. That means agents are making decisions based on something they're not really solid on, right? The other thing too, and I said, personally, I would want to know what kind of support it personally. That's as a brokerage, but
what about an attorney? Do you care if the agent has access to an attorney, or does the brokerage have an attorney? Do you care about that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because we're people, right? And as much as we rely on the broker to be the end all for all questions, right?
It's no pressure.
Right. But I know. Not everybody has all the answers. There's a lot of great stuff. And I am, one thing I want to say about you and this brokerage is...
Look, I got an extra payment here. Wow. It's amazing.
No, but one of the first things you said to me, one of the reasons why I came here was, we talked about, I did ask those questions, what kind of support do you offer? What kind of, and you said, well, hey, show up at one of my team meetings, right? And one of the things that you said to me was, is no matter how long I'm in it, no matter how much experience I have, there is still a lot I can learn, right? Mm-hmm. And to have that more humbled attitude, and now working with you, I believe that. That is your mentality towards it, right? Yeah. You're very open to hearing people out, and I've been around a lot of people in this industry where they think they know it all, or they have all the answers, or they're not willing to consider other ways of looking at things, and that to me is dangerous, right? It's not only dangerous, but I don't want those people working for me. As if I'm looking for an agent, that is not the person I want. I want the person that is going to ask the questions, that's going to be open to looking at things a little bit differently, right? To reach out when you need help, rather than just reacting or taking a position based on something that maybe you should be looking further into.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I can say from my vantage point, working within the business for 10 years, I have always had a need for an attorney.
Right.
And it's one of the first things I would never go personally work with anyone who didn't have an attorney that was easily accessible and easily just at the ready.
Right.
So as a client, I really feel like you need to have an agent on your side that does have that, because you're right, we're working with these contracts. There are some nits to this because no deal is ever the same. They're always different. And to have a sidebar with somebody who's, really qualified as an attorney is super important. So I would definitely, if I were a buyer, I would absolutely ask.
Yeah.
And if you're a seller too,
yeah.
Same thing. You've got to have backup and resourcing, because I know an okay amount, but I always need to vet out, is that okay if I'm ever in question? I'm never hesitant to make that phone call.
Right.
And especially on the behalf of a client where there's money on the line. That's super, super important.
Right.
Yeah.
So and another thing about this that I was getting to is personally I would ask, so let me explain. I would ask if the person is on a team, or what kind of support that way they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been an independent agent pretty much my whole career, right? And I've been successful.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to be on a team, right? I chose to be on a team. And the amount of resources that's available is tremendous advantage in any transaction, and just in general, being able to conduct my business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can't do the same thing as an independent agent. So not that some agents don't do a great job.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but there is if I'm advising my kids or my grandkids, and I'm not in the industry, I would ask them, you probably do want to use somebody that's on a team. Now, a lot of people might argue with me, right? But, again, if there's an agent closing at least 5-6 deals a year, right, that's in a brokerage that is got a lot of support and continuing education, and that they're actively full-time, that agent is in that brokerage,
mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And even on top of it, if they have a team that can support them, both in,
mm-hmm. questions
and needs, and there's a whole lot of team provides, right? That, to me, those are the important things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And, in saying that, I think the whole point of this is kind of like, okay, so now buyers are going to be responsible for the commission, right? If you have all that, if you have somebody that is working for you, and they have a good brokerage with continuing education, there's going to be more costs involved there, right? If you have, or like you said, a brokerage that is using an attorney, and when
mm-hmm.
I say attorney, that's not to protect the brokerage from the client.
Oh, no.
That can be the brokerage asking the questions that they don't have the answers to.
Right. Or how do we effectively phrase this in an addendum so that we are protecting you as a client?
Right.
It could be any myriad of things. Or there's a stopgap in this contract, and we're getting ready to eclipse that. What shall we do? Shall we do A or B?
Right.
Or maybe they're going to tell us C that you haven't even thought of. Those are super important.
And there's going to be some expense with a team. Right, you can't run a team on nothing, so there's going to be
more backbone. There's just more resourcing
mm-hmm.
back there.
Yeah. So I mean, again, the value and what people are asking buyers to do now is, I mean, really dependent on those. And just to take this one step further, I would also kind of ask the style. When I said I would ask for some kind of, what's your game plan?
Yeah.
I you know me well enough now, right? My game plan is, I think a lot of people look at agents as, there's a seller's agent and there's a buyer's agent, and you're butting heads. I mean, we're taking side. Well, ultimately in the end, we need to be working together.
That's right.
Because we all have the same goal. And
Yes.
all I'm doing is representing a buyer, and the seller's agent should just be representing the seller's wishes, right? So, but we as agents want to advise, and I think there's a huge advantage to taking a position where you are working together with other agents
Yes.
to get
being collegial and collaborative.
and not like, oh, I'm going to take charge of this and all that. I mean, we're working together.
You don't have to be a jerk to get things done.
Right. But having the gumption to stand up for what's right when it's right.
Sure,
right.
sure.
So I guess that game plan is kind of, and to know the workarounds and stuff,
Which comes with experience.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the rounds of deals that they might have done in the year, and just more rounds equals more experience. You've seen more shades of purple and black and blue beat up.
Yeah. But that's, again, where the team comes into play, too. Because I know our team, we have a lot of, several seasoned veterans, agents, right?
Yeah,
And, we do discuss these deals as far as, how we can help each other, or giving some, different ways of looking at things that they can know, that there's another option to get that accomplished, right?
Yes.
And that's huge. You normally don't get that if you're not on a team.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more brain trust there.
Yeah.
Inside that group, because there's just a lot that happens, and you have the benefit from seeing all of that happen, whether it's from you or your colleague that's had some things happen.
Right.
So
I think.
I think we boiled the ocean.
Yeah.
I think, you've talked a lot about what it's going to entail, what changes could be possible, why it's important. So the last question is, a buyer says, oh, no, I can't afford that. I'm going to go this on my own, and I'm just going to represent myself. What are you going to do? What's your reaction to that?
I mean, my reaction or what I would tell them are two different things. I think if somebody, I wish you well, and I hope that you do the right thing that goes smoothly for you. It's not about it just going smoothly. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons, limited liability. You want to limit your exposure to liabilities in a deal. Again, we're touching on all these points of law, and if you don't know what those are, how can you navigate
Google does
that?
not tell you
everything.
No, I wish it did. It's going to get smarter over time, but
Yeah.
right now Google is, it's not going to tell you everything.
And the other thing too is, a good agent is gonna make his charges and then more back.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you not? I mean, it makes no sense. It absolutely makes no sense. I have had so many people tell me that, either they used another agent or they did something on their own, and they're like, and I'm like, I would talk about after the fact, and I'm like, I would have handled that a little bit different. I would have.
Yes, that's being very nice.
Well, I mean,
I know.
I get it. I get they don't know, but I would have told them I would have handled that different. I would have insisted on this, or I would have held a line here, and whatever my charges were, you would have made that and then some. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, then why wouldn't you have used me and got rid of those headaches? I like that buyers and sellers are educated, so I can have an educated discussion with them. So I don't mind that they want to know a lot about the industry, but to the point where they think that they should just walk in and that they could do the same thing that we do I don't get. at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I could represent myself in court the same way an attorney could.
Oh my gosh, no.
Right.
No, I definitely couldn't.
Right.
Yeah, no.
So.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great pleasure spending
has
time
been,
with you.
yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully our audience has learned a lot. This is Bryan Daane, Engel and Volkers St. Pete Beach. How do people reach you?
They can reach me through the brokerage, or my telephone number is 813-400-5573.
Okay, good. Well, tune in next time when we're going to talk about the impacts to sellers for these impending changes coming up. We're going to dive deeper the next go-around. Join us. Talk to you.